He lived alone, surrounded by the dim glow of multiple screens, while the laughter of children echoed faintly in the distance, unaware of the darkness that silently brewed just a few blocks away. In the quiet of his apartment, he rewound a VHS tape over and over again, staring intently at the flickering images on the screen. Horror films, anime, and footage that blurred the line between fantasy and reality. This was not the kind of horror one could watch and forget. It was the kind he was learning to create himself, piece by piece, in the shadows of his isolated life. Tokyo, 1988. A city of bright neon lights and busy streets, yet hidden in its quieter suburbs. One man's obsession with fantasy was about to turn into a nightmare that would consume the lives of innocent children. This is the story of Tsutomu Miyazaki, the man the media would call the Otaku murderer. A story of loneliness, obsession, and the terrifying moment when imagination crossed into reality. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born on August 21st, 1962, in the town of Itsukaichi, Tokyo, into a world that would be strangely unkind to him from the very beginning. He arrived prematurely, fragile and small, with a rare deformity that fused his hands directly to his wrists. This difference, though invisible to some, marked the start of a life filled with isolation, ridicule, and silent judgment from nearly everyone around him. Children at school laughed at him, teachers barely acknowledged his presence, and even within his own family he was treated like a ghost, present in body but invisible in spirit. Miyazaki watched life happen around him, never fully participating, feeling the sharp sting of loneliness and exclusion that would follow him into adolescence. By the time he was a teenager, he had retreated completely from the outside world, finding solace only in anime, manga, and horror films, while the darker corners of VHS became an obsession he could not resist. His bedroom became a cocoon of flickering screens, endless tapes, and sleepless nights where reality and fantasy began to blend into one another. The death of his grandfather, the only person who had shown him unconditional affection, shattered him completely. It was a moment when grief and obsession intertwined, leading Miyazaki to commit a shocking act. He later admitted to consuming a small portion of his grandfather's ashes, an act that symbolized the first tangible crossing of the boundary between love, grief, and the beginnings of madness. August 22nd, 1988. 4-year-old Mari Kono played outside with a bright yellow teddy bear clutched in her small hands. She was innocent, full of life, laughing as she chased butterflies across the open fields of Saitama Prefecture, completely unaware that danger was closing in around her. Miyazaki had already prepared, luring her to a secluded forested area. In those moments, Mari's world of safety and comfort would vanish. He ended her life there, taking her body home as though it were just another object in his growing collection of horrors. Over the next few days, he burned the remains in a furnace and sent her parents a small box containing ashes, teeth, and a handwritten note that simply read, "Mari, bones." The family was devastated beyond comprehension, and the quiet man next door remained undetected by the community that still trusted its familiar, ordinary neighbor. Between October 1988 and June 1989, Miyazaki's crimes escalated, with the disappearance of 3 more young girls. Masami Yoshizawa, 4. A joyful child who loved to sing and dance, often mimicking her favorite anime characters. Erika Namba, 7. A bright girl with dreams of becoming a singer, often humming melodies in her room. Ayako Nomoto, 7. A quiet, imaginative child who adored painting and collecting seashells from the nearby river. Each murder followed a chilling ritual, photographing, dismembering, and preserving parts of their bodies. The hands of his victims were displayed carefully on shelves alongside horror manga and VHS tapes, turning his apartment into a grotesque shrine to death and obsession. The police found drawings, letters, and fragments of his victims, each a clue to his deteriorating mental state and the complete control his fantasy had over reality. The media quickly labeled him the Otaku murderer, and fear gripped Tokyo suburbs. Streets emptied at dusk, and parents kept their children indoors, terrified of the man living among them. Miyazaki's obsession with his rituals became all-consuming. He spoke to hallucinations he named Ratman, a twisted, half-human, half-rodent figure that he believed controlled him. He photographed his victims meticulously, preserving parts of their bodies as trophies. His apartment became a world where fantasy and horror merged into a tangible, living nightmare. "They will understand me when they see what I've done," he said, revealing a mind completely detached from empathy and reality. His loneliness, isolation, and obsessive behavior fueled the transformation from a socially withdrawn young man into a killer whose understanding of morality had been warped by his compulsions and fantasies. The discovery of the pattern of murders sent waves of panic through the community. Schools warned children to stay home, parks were abandoned, and parents lived in constant fear. The media debated whether anime, horror films, and otaku culture had contributed to the creation of a monster, while the families of the victims were left grieving, struggling to process the unimaginable horror that had touched their lives. "We didn't just lose our children," one mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We lost our sense of safety. We lost the trust we had in the world around us." July 23, 1989. Miyazaki attempted to photograph a young girl in a Tokyo park. Her scream pierced the quiet afternoon, drawing the attention of her father, who gave chase. Miyazaki fled, but returned later to retrieve his car, unaware that the police were lying in wait. When they entered his apartment, investigators were met with a scene described as a theater of nightmares. Thousands of VHS tapes filled shelves, some horror films, some depicting real-life crimes. Photographs of his victims lined walls, alongside discarded bones, preserved hands, and dolls arranged as if observing the macabre collection. Drawings of Ratman covered notebooks, showcasing the twisted fantasy that had overtaken his mind. Psychiatrists differed in their opinions. Some deemed him schizophrenic, others delusional, while some insisted he was fully aware of his actions, a man choosing darkness knowingly. The trial began in 1990. Miyazaki's courtroom demeanor fluctuated wildly, at times calm and composed, other times laughing uncontrollably, speaking of the control Ratman had over him. Over 7 years, debate raged. Was he a madman, or simply pure evil? In 1997, the verdict was delivered. Guilty, sentenced to death by hanging. His final appeal was denied in 2006, and in 2008, the sentence was carried out. The media quickly blamed otaku culture, suggesting anime and horror had nurtured a generation of monsters. Psychologists disagreed, emphasizing instead the dangers of social isolation, neglect, and untreated psychological disorders. In the end, Tsutomu Miyazaki's story is not just about murder. It's about what happens when a human being becomes completely disconnected, when obsession replaces empathy, and when fantasy consumes reality. He called himself a collector of spirits, but what he really collected were lost souls, including his own. If you want more in-depth case studies where we explore the full story, the failures, and the breakthroughs, hit subscribe. And share your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you feel after hearing this one.